Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Committee on Ordinance. The members present are all of them. I am the chair, City Councilor at Large Rebecca Lisi. From my left, we have City Councilor for Ward 3, David Bartley, and then continuing on to my right, City Councilor at Large, Jennifer Shetanoff, City Councilor for Ward 5, Linda Vacan, and City Councilor for Ward 7, Gordon Alexander. We're also joined this evening by several other councilors. We have Councilor Anthony Soto from Ward 2 and Councilor at Large Joe McGivern. Thanks for coming down. We have scheduled several joint public hearings with the Planning Board this evening. I understand that the Planning Board does not have quorum, so I think that for most of these items, we're going to need to open up the hearings and then continue them to another date certain. So for my committee, can we take up items number 1, 2, 3, and 4 as a package?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to take up items number 1 through 4 as a package. All in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
Do you need a motion to open the public
Yeah,
hearing?
motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. We do have Chris LaChapelle here from the Planning Board. You are now in turn to open up the meeting, your meeting.
Make a motion to open the public hearing of the Planning Board, joint public hearing with the Ordinance Committee for items, amend the shopping center zone and create shopping center zoning for large-scale districts. Do I second that myself? We would like to, at this time, continue that joint public hearing to July 28th at 6:30.
And this is for items number 1 and 3 on our agenda, the 2 SC district items.
Yes.
Okay. So that's 7:28 at 6:30.
Yes.
Can someone from the Ordinance Committee please motion to separate items number 1 and 3 out from the package and motion to continue that public hearing?
Motion to separate out items number 1 and 3.
Motion has been made and seconded to separate items number 1 and 3 from the package. All in favor?
Aye. Motion to continue the public hearing on those two items to 7:28 at 6:30.
Motion has been made and seconded to continue items number 1 and 3, which is a joint public hearing, to July 28th at 6:30 p.m. Under discussion, Council Bartley. You're right, it is 4.
I think it's 3 and 4. There's no language in 1, is there?
Rebecca, can you pass an extra agenda?
They didn't tell me it would
It's
be this
actually,
much.
it's items 3 and 4, as opposed to 1 and 3.
Language in there.
To reconsider. Motion has been made and seconded to reconsider. All in favor?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to separate items 3 and 4 from the package. All in favor? So moved. And then the motion to continue is?
Motion to continue 3 and 4 to 7:28 at 6:30.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor? So moved. This, items number 3 and 4 are now being continued as a joint public hearing on July 28th at 6:30 p.m. here in council chambers.
And I would make a motion that items 1 and 2 are continued to either August 25th or September 8th.
As of right now, this committee is not meeting in August except for on the 11th. So we can move it forward and continue to the 8th, which would bring us back to our normal second Tuesday set schedule.
It's fine.
So do you need to motion and continue it?
make a motion to reconvene the joint public hearing on items 1 and 2 to September 8th, 2015. 5 and 6 on our agenda, planning board agenda.
The motion has been made and seconded to continue items number 1 and 2 to September 8th at 6:30 PM. All in favor? Aye. So moved. Thank you for coming down. Sorry that we couldn't take care of more business this evening.
Thank you very much.
Oh, we continued both of them, right.
Will we have a recommendation from the planning board on item number 5?
Right.
So I'll read that into the record.
All right, Chris, good job. That was quick.
You should run more meetings.
It goes by wicked quick.
Take care.
Motion to take up item number 5.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to take up item number 5, which is an order filed by Councilor Alexander that the city adopt ordinances to control the position, size, and other attributes of parking areas in residential zones and limitations on the number and type of vehicle appropriate for each zone. All in favor? Aye. So moved. The planning board met separately on this item and closed their public hearing and sent along a recommendation to us. And I will read it into the record. It's pretty short. Re-regulate parking areas and vehicle types in residential zones. Dear Councilor Lisi, please be advised that the Holyoke Planning Board at their June 23rd, 2015 meeting discussed the above referenced text change requests to the zoning ordinance. After discussion, based on the information received during the public hearings, the board voted unanimously to recommend the ordinance committee of the city council that the zone change request be given leave to withdraw without prejudice. It was the planning board's conclusion that without more specificity regarding the issue sought to be addressed, we could make no constructive proposals to the city council. Accordingly, the board recommends that the order be withdrawn without prejudice, and if there is the will of the council and the maker of the order, it be refiled in a form that more clearly outlines its intent. Such a refiling will allow planning staff and the planning board to better serve the city of Holyoke and the city council. Very truly yours, Chair Panich.
If I may.
Under discussion, Councilor Alexander.
Thank you. And I'm fine with the recommendation, leave to withdraw, and I'll refile something more specific. This actually fell out of the planning department, who requested that I file something. And, you know, I guess the spotlight shined elsewhere, and so it's no longer on their radar or whatever, and that's fine. But basically, it fell out of the particular case of the gentleman who's got the Shell station up next to Stop and Shop, who they were going through the process and through the code enforcement officer and everything to regulate the number of cars he had on that property, because he had many more cars than the permit allowed, and there is a special permit for a car repair shop, I guess it is, that dictates how many cars you can have on the property, and they need to be registered vehicles, they can't be unregistered, all these kinds of things. And what was happening was the gentleman appeared to be, I don't know that this is true, but this appeared to be the case from Google Photos, that he was taking many of the cars up to his private residence, wherever that is, somewhere else in the city, and parking them there. And there is no regulation at all because it's in a residential district, and he could have, 50, 60, 70 cars sitting up there rusting away in a farm field. And there was no regulation on that. And so there was a thought that, oh, gee, well, if we're going to regulate how many cars you can park on a parking lot that's got drainage and sump pumps and everything else, maybe we should regulate how many cars you can park in a residential area where your neighbors are staring at the cars that are falling apart in your backyard. And so I'll talk to planning, I'll file something that's a little bit more specific, and it can be taken up and or not, whatever. I don't really have a dog in the fight, but I do think it makes sense to, at some point, if you have a driveway, you can park your cars in your driveway, that's fine. At some point, there should probably be a zoning level recognition that if you've paved half your backyard and you're parking 25 cars, that's no longer personal use in your driveway, you now have a parking lot. And the city has an interest in making sure that's not an eyesore, a public nuisance of any sort, that kind of thing. So we probably should have some kind of way to get our arms around that if something's getting out of control. So I'll refile. So I make a motion to accept the recommendation and give the item leave to withdraw?
Sure, I think just in terms of procedure, this is a public hearing, so we should open the public hearing, and
Sure, a motion to open the public hearing.
motion has been made and seconded to open the public hearing and allow any members of the public to speak in favor or against this recommendation. There's no one here.
Kara, do you have
but
anything? Joe wants to say
Councilor McGivern would like to speak.
I have questions for the planning director.
He's not here any longer.
The reason why?
I think that's the point.
I think that they all left with the idea that their agenda, the business on their agenda was no longer
That's the
present.
planning board. I have a question for the planning director, for staff.
Let's see if we can get him back in the room.
Does that question require that the public hearing still be open, or can we do that under the public meeting that surrounds the public hearing?
Well, I'll ask my question, and then maybe you can determine. If, understanding, I've been here when the planning board had their public hearing with us, when they closed it, and I understand their recommendation, but what are they looking for? You know, I think Councilor Alexander, out of good faith, filed an order on behalf of the planning department itself. There's a legitimate reason to look at the ordinance. There's a legitimate reason to look at the zone change. With this in front of us, there's no reason why we can't put the specifics into it and adopt a new zone. I mean, this, withdraw, file again is becoming more of an excuse than of a proactive way of trying to correct something that's wrong.
Under discussion, Councilor Bacon.
There has to be some sort of ordinance that prohibits it, because otherwise we wouldn't have had the hearings around creating the parking in the residential zone relative to Mountain Park. Remember when we did that? So.
Well, that has to do with paving, so I know that.
Right. So if the idea or the issue is that it's in an unpaved area, it just comes to mind that there's other ordinances around nuisances and how many unregistered vehicles are on a property that might come to bear on at least the example that you were talking about. Yeah.
In existence at some level, yeah.
Yeah, so I just think there may be some other ordinances that could address that particular issue. But you know more about what gave rise to this, than we do.
Yeah,
But
it's just, I think I probably got, it came up in the sense of, oh gee, we ought to take a look at this. And I went ahead and filed an order thinking that's a good way to take a look at it, but maybe that was a little premature and we should have sort of an offline discussion of what are we trying to achieve and then file an actionable order.
Well, yeah,
opposed
and
to a
especially
fuzzy order.
as Councilor Bacon's mentioning, a review of the ordinances to find out where the gaps are, to find out which ordinance and which part of which ordinance needs to be tightened up.
Sure. So, I have no problem that was a not particularly well-crafted order, and I'll just refile. With due respect to Joe's point, which I think is a good one, that the withdraw to refile just for the sake of withdrawing to refile is just another way of kicking the can down the road. But I think in this case,
It's
it
a
makes
little
sense.
costly too, because we have to re-advertise.
It's true. I'm willing to table this.
I'm not asking the committee, I'm just making a point. If you feel the best route is to give leave to withdraw and go back to the drawing board, that's fine, but maybe we can have a more general discussion with the planning department on how to get to point A from point B without going through all this, it seems like every other public hearing we have.
So just one question for Kara, if we may suspend the necessary rules.
Motion to suspend?
Motion has been made and seconded to suspend the necessary rules, allow legal to speak. All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Kara, so my question would be, if we keep this tabled and explore ordinance language to clean up this gap that's allowing for excessive parking in residential areas, would we be able to make that change without the planning board making a recommendation, or would we have to ask them to re-advertise and open up their meeting again in some way, shape, or form, or is that even not possible at this point in time?
And the planning board is supposed to give a recommendation on actual proposed language, so since that wasn't considered,
So their recommendation doesn't even reference proposed language, right?
right, because there never was.
So would this
any,
even be a
so-
legitimate recommendation?
Well, they closed their public hearing, and I would have to look back through the notes. I guess your public hearing is still open, so I mean, it really, I mean, we had several meetings and never fleshed out what we were trying to get at, so
Yeah.
I think
So,
that's
I mean,
where
I guess
they're-
my like main question is there any way to salvage this order, given that the planning board has weighed in with a recommendation and closed their public hearing? Or do we need to refile anyhow?
Yeah, I mean, where the planning board has already closed it and given a recommendation, I think it would need to be
I think on the safe side, it would be refiled.
Okay. And Counselor McIvern?
Kara, if this were a zone change and the planning board made a recommendation or chose not to make a recommendation, when their time period is up, it's left to us to do as we see fit. So this, I know this is a text change, and it certainly would make more sense to have the input of the planning board to the new text, but they had their opportunity, to join us, and it seems, as Councilor Alexander said, it was their request to do this in the first place. And, they're costing us money because we'll have to re-advertise. They're costing the time of this good committee and their favorite other city councilors who come to these meetings.
I don't know, I mean, I don't want to speak on behalf of the planning department, I don't think that
Well,
would
they
be
should be here
fair.
right
I
now,
don't
is
wanna
what I'm saying, but
get into that, so. I mean, I guess if you kept your public hearing open and there was,
We would at least not have to re-advertise.
Is there any requirement that we advertise each public hearing separately?
You
Or can
don't
we
have
just
to,
tack it on to some other
we
notice
could
that we're already
create, I
filing?
mean, so like we advertised 2 new hearings for this week and they were, we're still paying for each advertisement, even if we do multiple for 1 week. It's not like you can list them all, it's just the legal requirement. You can't list multiple in,
Hearings in one ad?
even if you do, you have to pay for each separate listing.
What?
Kara, do you want to answer that question anymore succinctly than I can?
for the advertisement, or, I mean, everything has to be advertised if
Right,
there's
but if we-
multiple.
Can't we just put out an ad saying we're holding a public hearing on these 3 issues and pay 1 fee to the newspaper?
That's how we do it.
Yeah. So it doesn't cost more to re-advertise, because we just tack it on to something else we're advertising anyway.
Well, the
I think you pay by
advertising
the
space,
size.
right?
You pay by
yeah.
the size of the ad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but it still is a bigger ad
Yeah.
and therefore more money.
Extra line, yes.
Yeah. Council Bartley wanted to join in.
Yeah, Kara, does this city have a parking advisory board?
We were supposed to have one, and I filed an order to reinstate it in some way,
Right,
but
there might
do
be an
have an ordinance
ordinance
creating it.
that sets something like that up, but in practice, I don't think there is one.
There's nobody appointed to it, there is one by ordinance.
There is one yeah, okay, so, and there's no members. Joe, can I just talk to Joe? Have we ever had one, Joe? Parking advisory board, to your recollection?
there's been ad hoc parking advisory boards, but with more specific charges. For one, the last big one I remember was the downtown area where there were city councilors, business merchants, the Chamber of Commerce, and an entire plan was put together for the downtown. But one in general, I don't remember.
So that, and what you just said, and that's why I asked you the question, pretty much mirrors what's in the ordinance, Joe. So the people you just listed were pretty much the way the ordinance was written up, include the Chamber of Commerce, downtown business person, city councilor, 1 at large, 1 ward, appointed by the mayor, confirmed by the city council, 9 people, served 3-year term staggered. So, I mean,
Yeah.
this,
I filed an order a while ago to either fill it or kill it, because what's the point of having an ordinance for an empty board?
well, and if this is a case in point, that this is, your order is the purpose, of this advisory committee.
Right. So,
So it seems like we should review it seems like we should review who appoints the Parking Advisory Committee and see if we could get that into action before the business that's before us this evening.
Yeah, maybe we could accomplish that. Why withdraw Gordon's order?
I'm not sure that's relevant to this.
Can you speak into the microphone?
I'm not sure that's relevant to this, because this order really is addressing creating de facto parking where you're not really supposed to be. More in the sense of like vehicle storage or, just random piles of cars. Somebody who's got 10 cars because they just like cars. As opposed to the parking advisory boards whose mandate, at least in my understanding, was to focus on what are the needs and how can we create parking that satisfies parking needs to the business community in the downtown that may not have been stated in the ordinance, but I'm sure that was the intent. If you look at the composition of the board, it was really geared towards how do we solve the need for parking in the business downtown.
Yeah, it's true.
No, kind of, it's pretty broad. The language is pretty broad, Gordon.
The language is fuzzy, but the intent, I think, was fairly clear at the time.
So there is a motion
but any which way.
there is a motion on the floor that was made by Councilor Alexander and seconded by Councilor Bacon to give this leave to withdraw per the planning board's recommendation. All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Without prejudice, per the recommendation?
That
Yep.
was the recommendation without prejudice.
Okay, so that concludes our meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. We meet again on the 28th and then on August 11th. And that's it for the summer.